Welcome to Awakened Calm. There is a reason you keep falling into the same emotional loops, and it is not what you think. Most people believe that if they push hard enough, distract themselves long enough, or bury their feelings deep enough, they can escape the patterns that haunt them. But what if the struggle itself is the trap? What if every time you try to silence your anger or suppress your anxiety, you are only feeding it? Imagine for a moment that the very emotions you have been fighting are not your enemies, but the doorway to your freedom. Tonight, you are about to step into a story that has carried people through war, exile, heartbreak, and disappointment. It is not another self-help formula promising instant happiness or positive thinking slogans that fall apart when life gets heavy. This is ancient wisdom that has been tested in the most unforgiving circumstances and has emerged as a compass for those who refuse to be broken by suffering. Picture someone listening to this in New York after a long day at work, shoulders heavy with stress, wondering why peace always feels just out of reach. At the same time, someone in London leans back into a chair, exhaling as they hear the same words. Across the ocean in Toronto, another person lets go of the day's noise and begins to soften. And maybe you, wherever you are in this moment, are searching for the same thing they are. Relief, presence, a sense that you are not at war with yourself. The truth is this: you are not failing because your emotions return again and again. You are not weak because sadness still visits or anger still sparks when you least expect it. These patterns are not proof that you are broken. They are invitations to discover a new way of meeting life. And when you learn how to approach them with awareness instead of resistance, they lose their power over you. What you are about to discover is simple yet radical. Freedom does not come from becoming someone else. It comes from learning to arrive fully in the life you already have. It comes from recognizing that the peace you have been chasing is not waiting for perfect circumstances. It is already here waiting for your attention. This journey begins not with grand theories, but with a practice as natural as breathing. It begins with a way of listening so deeply that even your most difficult emotions soften in the presence of your compassion. It begins with a perspective that changes how you see anger, anxiety, and sadness, no longer as enemies to be fought, but as signals to be understood. So, as you listen, let yourself relax. You may want to dim the lights, settle into your chair, or simply breathe more slowly, because what follows is not a lecture to be memorized. It is an experience to be felt. By the end, you will see why trying to conquer your emotions has only chained you to them, and how listening with presence can finally set you free. Illustrative story: shifting the setting for freshness. Imagine a quiet village nestled between a wide river and rolling hills. It is not a scene from a textbook on philosophy, but from daily life. The sun is low, scattering golden light across the water, and children run barefoot along the banks. This is not wartime Vietnam or a battlefield of bombs and smoke. It is an ordinary place, the kind of place where nothing extraordinary seems likely to happen. Yet it is here in the rhythms of everyday living that a profound teaching is revealed. One afternoon, an old monk visiting the village notices a young boy crying by the riverside. His small wooden boat, a toy he had carved himself, has slipped from his hands and drifted away. For a child, this is no small tragedy. The boat carried his effort, his pride, and his joy. He stomps his feet in frustration, his face red with the heat of tears. Around him, other children hesitate, unsure whether to comfort him or stay silent. Some laugh nervously, not knowing what else to do. The monk kneels beside the boy and watches the water carry the toy further downstream. He does not rush to fix the situation. He does not promise to make a new boat. Instead, he places a gentle hand on the boy's shoulder and asks, "What do you see happening to your boat right now?" The child sniffles, trying to speak through his sobs. "It is leaving me," he says. "I cannot stop it." The monk nods his eyes, following the little vessel. "That is true," he replies. "You cannot stop the river from carrying it. But tell me, what else is the river doing besides taking your boat?" The boy pauses, his tears slowing just enough for him to notice. He sees the current swirl around a rock, creating patterns of light. He notices fish leaping in the distance. He sees the river reflecting the clouds. Slowly, he begins to realize that the river is not his enemy. It is simply being what it is. This moment, small as it seems, opens a doorway. The boy's tears ease. His breath steadies. The monk whispers, "The river is like your feelings. They come, they go. Sometimes they carry something precious away. But if you fight the river, you only exhaust yourself. If you watch it, if you let it flow, you begin to see that the river gives as much as it takes. This simple story carries weight far beyond a lost toy. It is a lesson about how we often treat our emotions. When sadness sweeps in, we thrash against it. When anger rises, we clench our fists as if trying to dam the current with our bare hands. But the harder we resist, the more powerful the current feels. The more we insist on control, the more control slips away. The monk's presence at the riverbank teaches something essential: the act of noticing without judgment. He does not rush to distract the boy or scold him for crying. He does not offer hollow comfort. Instead, he turns the boy's attention to the very thing causing his pain. He invites the child to look again and see differently. This is not an ancient parable told in dusty temples. It could be any child in any town in America or Europe crying over a broken toy, a lost game, or a harsh word. The lesson is, universal suffering does not always come from what is lost, but from the way we relate to that loss. The story of the boy and his boat offers us a way to examine our own lives. Consider the times when something small, a missed bus, a critical comment from a coworker, a broken glass in the kitchen, has provoked outsized anger or despair. To an outsider, these may seem minor, but to the one experiencing them, they feel heavy. Why? Because we resist. We insist that reality should have unfolded differently. The river metaphor is powerful because it reframes the struggle. Instead of trying to block the current, we can stand on the bank and observe. The emotions are still there, but they do not drown us. We see them, name them, and allow them to move on. Just as the river carries the boy's boat away, our emotions will move if we stop clinging to them. Think of a time when you were angry. The energy surged like a flood. Your jaw tightened, your chest burned. In that moment, it felt impossible to let go. But hours later, the anger had shifted. You might have felt tired, even embarrassed by how strongly you reacted. This is the river at work. Anger, like water, moves. The practice is not to deny it, but to watch it flow without being swept away. The story deepens when we imagine what happens next. The boy returns home without his boat. He could have clung to bitterness, complaining that the river stole his treasure. Instead, because of the monk's words, he carries a different awareness. He tells his mother, "The river took my boat, but it also showed me its fish and its light." She smiles, perhaps not fully understanding, but noticing that her son is calmer than she expected. This is how wisdom spreads. A single shift in perception ripples through relationships. The boy's calm presence eases his mother's worry. His friends who witness the scene begin to think differently about their own small losses. And the monk, having planted a seed, continues his journey, knowing that the teaching is alive in another heart. For an audience in the United States, Canada, or Europe, this story is not distant. It speaks directly to the modern challenge of stress and emotional overwhelm. In workplaces, people feel swept away by deadlines and criticism. In homes, parents feel powerless against the tide of children's tantrums or teenagers' silence. On city streets, strangers collide in moments of road rage that flare and vanish like storms. Each of these is a river moment. The choice is always the same: fight the current and drown in frustration, or stand on the bank and breathe. Watching the river does not erase its force, but it changes your relationship to it. Instead of being trapped inside the swirl, you become the observer, steady and grounded. This is why the monk did not chase the toy or try to save it. The lesson was never about the boat. It was about the boy learning to see his feelings as part of a larger flow. Let us carry the story further into the everyday realities of modern life. Imagine a young professional in Toronto. She has worked hard all week only to have her manager dismiss her effort with a careless remark. She feels the sting of unfairness, the burn of humiliation. Her first instinct is to defend herself, to argue, to push back. But she remembers the story of the boy and the river. She steps outside, takes a slow breath, and watches her anger like a current. She names it softly: anger is here. She does not deny it, but she does not feed it either. Minutes later, the intensity softens. She can return to her desk, not as a victim of rage, but as someone who has let the river flow past. Or consider a father in Chicago dealing with his teenage son's sharp words. He feels the surge of defensiveness, the urge to shout, but he recalls that resistance strengthens the flood. Instead, He takes 3 breaths, allowing the tide of frustration to pass before he speaks. The conversation shifts from confrontation to connection. The cycle of anger that he inherited from his own father loosens its grip. These are not extraordinary stories. They are ordinary moments transformed by awareness, and they are accessible to anyone, regardless of culture or background. The lesson of the river can also be extended to joy, not only pain. Too often we cling to happiness, fearing its loss. Think of a summer evening in Paris when the air is warm and the company is good. You feel a rush of contentment and immediately think, I wish this moment would last forever. But clinging to joy creates suffering too. The river reminds us, let the moment flow. Enjoy it as it passes, but do not try to dam it up. Joy, like sorrow, is a current. Its beauty lies in its movement. The monk's teaching is not about detachment in the cold sense of indifference. It is about intimacy with life, without the desperation to control it. By guiding the boy to watch his boat drift, he was showing him a way to engage fully with reality, while letting go of the illusion of control. This is not withdrawal from life, but a deeper participation in it. As the story travels across borders, it adapts. In Europe, it speaks to those carrying the weight of economic uncertainty or political division. In North America, it addresses the relentless pace of modern living, where people feel pressured to succeed at every moment. In Canada, it resonates with those who find solace in nature's vast rivers and forests, reminding them that human emotions are no different from the changing landscapes around them. The universality of the river metaphor lies in its simplicity. Everyone has seen water flow. Everyone has felt carried by forces they could not control. And everyone knows the exhaustion of resisting what cannot be stopped. This is why the story is not just a parable for children, but a guide for adults. It tells us that our task is not to master the river, but to learn from it, to let it teach us patience, perspective, and the art of surrender. By shifting the setting from war to an ordinary riverbank, the teaching becomes more accessible. It shows that wisdom is not reserved for extraordinary crises. It is available in the everyday struggles of life. A child losing a toy, a worker enduring criticism, a parent facing conflict. These are the classrooms of awakening. When we recall the boy at the river, we are reminded of our own small boats, the hopes we invested in a job that did not work out, the relationships that drifted away despite our efforts, the opportunities that slipped from our grasp. Each loss felt like a theft, leaving us angry or bitter. But if we look again, we see the river still flowing, offering new patterns, new reflections, new chances. The monk's teaching asks us to shift from resistance to presence, to see loss not as an end, but as part of the larger flow of life. To realize that the river, like our emotions, is never still, but always moving toward transformation. In the next part of our journey, we will see how this simple awareness grows into a deeper practice. But before we move forward, pause for a moment. Picture your own river. What boat has drifted from your hands? What emotion has carried you farther than you wanted to go? Can you stand on the bank, breathe deeply, and watch it flow? The answer may surprise you, because sometimes the greatest freedom is not in holding on, but in letting go. Deep listening and transforming the way we relate to emotions. When the boy stood on the riverbank and watched his small wooden boat drift away, he learned something vital. He discovered that clinging to his sorrow or fighting against the current only deepened his pain. By shifting his attention, he began to see the river in a new way. This moment is more than a story about a child and a toy. It is a window into the heart of Buddhist wisdom. The essence of that wisdom can be expressed in a single practice: listening deeply. At first, this sounds simple, almost too simple. Listen to what? Listen to whom? The answer is both inward and outward. Deep listening means opening our awareness to our own emotions, and also to the emotions of others without rushing to fix, defend, or judge. Most of us do not truly listen. When someone speaks, we often prepare our response instead of hearing their words. When an emotion rises within us, we instinctively push it away or drown in it. Rarely do we pause long enough to simply be present, and yet presence is the soil in which transformation grows. Listening to yourself first. Imagine the next time anger rises in your chest. You feel heat in your face, your breath shortens, your body tightens. Usually the impulse is immediate reaction: slam a door, raise your voice, or silently stew until resentment hardens. But what if in that very moment you treated anger not as an enemy, but as a visitor knocking at your door? A Zen teacher once described emotions as guests arriving at a house. Some come politely, others burst in uninvited. Either way, they are still guests. You can recognize them, offer them a seat, and let them stay until they are ready to leave. The problem arises when we confuse the guest with the house. We forget that the house, our deeper awareness, remains steady no matter who comes to visit. To practice listening to yourself is to notice the arrival of these guests without letting them take over. Instead of declaring, "I am angry," try saying, "Anger is here." That small shift matters. It reminds you that you are not the anger itself. You are the host, not the visitor. This recognition opens space. In that space, the intensity softens. You begin to hear what the emotion is trying to communicate. Anger may be pointing to a boundary. Crossed sadness may be reminding you of something cherished that has been lost. Fear may be signaling the need for caution. By listening, you learn from your emotions instead of being ruled by them. Listening to others with presence. Deep listening does not stop with ourselves. It extends outward. Think of the last time you felt unheard by someone close to you. Perhaps you shared a concern with a friend only to be met with quick advice or a change of subject. The sting of not being understood often hurts more than the original problem. Now imagine the opposite. Someone sits across from you, looks into your eyes, and truly listens. They do not interrupt, they do not rush, they do not judge. Their silence is not empty but full, creating space for your words to land. In that space you feel lighter. Sometimes the relief of being heard is enough to dissolve the very tension that brought you to speak. This is the gift of deep listening. It is not about agreeing with everything said. It is not about solving every issue. It is about offering presence so complete that the other person feels safe to express their truth. In families, this practice heals generations of pain. In workplaces, it transforms conflict into collaboration. In friendships, it strengthens bonds beyond words. The trap of reaction. Why then do we struggle so much with listening? Part of the reason lies in habit. From childhood, many of us were taught to react quickly. We learned that strong emotions are dangerous, that silence is awkward, that solutions must be immediate. So we cut each other off, defend our positions, or bury uncomfortable feelings. But reaction is not the same as response. Reaction is automatic, fueled by habit and impulse. Response is deliberate, born from awareness. The difference between the two is the difference between drowning in the river and standing on its bank. When we react, we add fuel to the fire. A harsh word is met with a harsher word. Suspicion breeds defensiveness. Fear turns into anger, and the cycle spins on. But when we pause and listen, we interrupt the cycle. We step out of the loop and create the possibility of a new pattern. A story of a father and his son. Consider a man in Montreal, raised by a father whose temper controlled the household. As a child, he learned that anger was answered with anger. Now, as a parent himself, he feels the same fury rise when his teenage son disobeys. In the past, he would have shouted, replaying the script inherited from his father. But tonight, something different happens. He remembers the practice of deep listening. As his son's words cut sharply, he feels the surge of anger in his body. Instead of unleashing it, he silently names it. Anger is here. He breathes. He notices the pounding in his chest. He listens not to the words alone, but to the pain beneath them. His son's defiance is not hatred. It is the cry of a young man struggling for independence, aching to be seen. For the first time, the father responds not with shouting, but with silence. He lets his son finish. Then he says softly, "I hear that you are upset. Tell me more." The boy blinks, caught off guard by the absence of conflict. The conversation unfolds slowly. Tension remains, but something shifts. The cycle that bound father and son for generations loosens. This is the power of deep listening. It does not erase conflict overnight, but it plants a new seed. A seed of understanding that can grow where anger once spread. The role of compassion. Deep listening is inseparable from compassion. To listen without compassion is to collect words without meaning. To listen with compassion is to open the heart. Compassion allows us to hear not only what is spoken, but also what is hidden between the lines. When a coworker snaps at you, compassion listens for the fatigue behind the sharp tone. When a friend withdraws into silence, compassion listens for the sorrow too heavy to name. When your own mind floods with anxiety, compassion listens for the small child within you who longs for safety. Compassion does not mean indulgence. It does not excuse harmful behavior. Rather, it helps us respond with clarity instead of retaliation. It keeps the door open for healing. Practices for deep listening theory alone is not enough. To transform our relationship with emotions, we need practice. Here are ways to bring deep listening into daily life. 1. Silent sitting. Set aside 10 minutes each day to sit quietly. As emotions rise, name them gently. Fear is here. Sadness is here. Joy is here. Notice how they shift and fade. 2. Listening breath. When someone speaks to you, focus on your breathing. Let each inhale remind you to stay present. Each exhale releases the urge to interrupt or defend. 3. Reflective listening. After hearing someone repeat back what you understood in your own words, this simple act shows that you value their perspective and helps clarify meaning. 4. Pausing before response. In moments of conflict, pause 3 breaths before answering. This brief silence often reveals a wiser response than immediate reaction. 5. Compassionate self-talk. When negative emotions overwhelm you, place a hand on your chest and speak inwardly with kindness. I know you are there, anger. I will take care of you. These practices are not about perfection. They are about building a new habit of presence, one moment at a time. Why listening transforms cycles. Negative emotional cycles persist because they thrive on reaction. Anger fuels anger, fear fuels defensiveness, hurt fuels hurt. Each reaction feeds the next, creating a loop that feels unbreakable. Deep listening interrupts the loop. By not reacting, you remove the fuel. By listening, you create space for something new. This is why Buddhist teachers speak of listening as a form of love. To truly listen is to acknowledge another's humanity. It is to say, your pain matters, your words matter, you matter. That acknowledgement alone can begin to dissolve walls built over years of misunderstanding. A broader vision. Imagine communities practicing deep listening. Neighbors who disagree politically sit together and actually hear one another's fears. Families fractured by resentment choose to listen before judging. Leaders in offices listen to workers before enforcing decisions. In such spaces, trust begins to grow. Conflict does not vanish, but it becomes manageable, open to dialogue rather than locked in cycles of escalation. Even globally, this vision holds power. What if nations learn to listen with compassion instead of posturing with threats? What if cultures listen to one another's histories before rushing to judgment? It may sound idealistic, but every global change begins with individual practice. Returning to the river, think back to the boy on the riverbank. His shift from grief to awareness was possible because someone listened. The monk listened not with words but with presence. He saw the child's pain without rushing to erase it. He asked a simple question that turned the boy's attention inward. That was deep listening in action. We too can be that monk for ourselves, for our families, for our communities. By listening instead of reacting, we become the steady bank beside the rushing river. Emotions may come and go, but we remain rooted, offering stability. Invitation to practice. The next time you feel swept away by emotion, pause. Place a hand on your chest. Say quietly, this is anger, this is fear, this is sadness. Notice the shift as you become the observer instead of the prisoner. The next time someone speaks with frustration or sorrow, resist the urge to fix or argue. Breathe, listen, and let their words flow. You may discover that listening itself is the medicine. Conclusion of this section. Deep listening is not a luxury. It is a necessity in a world that too often drowns in noise. It transforms how we relate to our own emotions and how we connect with others. It turns reaction into response, conflict into dialogue, and suffering into understanding. By practicing deep listening, we break the cycle of negative habits. We stop fueling the fire of anger and begin cultivating the cool waters of compassion. In doing so, we create not only personal peace, but also a foundation for collective healing. The boy at the river lost his toy but gained a vision. We too can gain a vision, one where every emotion, no matter how fierce, is welcomed as a teacher, one where listening becomes our path to freedom. The second story, the cycle of inherited emotions and generational healing. Deep listening, as we explored, opens a door to transforming how we relate to our emotions and to those around us. But its influence goes beyond single moments. It has the power to shift entire cycles of behavior, especially those that repeat across generations. Families often carry patterns like invisible luggage passed from parent to child, not through conscious teaching but through unspoken habits of reaction. The story of a boy and his father illustrates how these cycles form and how they can finally be broken. The inheritance of anger. There was once a boy who grew up in a house where silence was rare and shouting was common. His father's voice, deep and sharp, filled the walls whenever frustration struck. A spilled drink, a broken tool, a careless word could ignite a storm. The boy learned quickly that anger was dangerous, unpredictable, and stronger than anything he could resist. But he also learned another lesson without realizing it, that anger was the way adults responded to the world. As the boy grew older, the pattern took root. When classmates teased him, he snapped back. When he lost a game, he kicked the ball hard against the fence. By the time he reached adulthood, anger had become his default armor. He did not choose it consciously, but it seemed to choose him. When he became a father himself, he promised he would be different. Yet when his own son tested boundaries, he heard his father's voice echoing through his own throat. The cycle continued. This story is not unique. In homes across North America, Europe, and beyond, cycles of anger, fear, or avoidance are repeated generation after generation. The words may differ, the cultures may vary, but the underlying dynamic is the same. Children absorb not only what their parents say, but how they react. Emotional habits flow like rivers through family lines, carving deep grooves that seem unchangeable. The moment of awakening. One evening after a long day of work, the father returned home to find his teenage son defiant. The boy had ignored chores, his headphones blasting music, his eyes avoiding his father's gaze. A familiar surge of fury rose in the father's chest. His muscles tightened, his jaw clenched. He could feel the words gathering sharp and heavy, ready to be unleashed. But something paused him. A memory flickered, the sound of his own father shouting, the fear that gripped his childhood stomach. The hopelessness of knowing no word he spoke could make it stop. For the first time, he recognized that he was about to become the very storm he once dreaded. Instead of shouting, he took a breath. He named what he felt silently. Anger is here. He looked at his son not as an enemy, but as a boy struggling to be seen. He asked himself, what if I do not react the way I was taught? What if I listen? So he sat down. His voice softened. He said simply, tell me what is going on. The boy looked startled, as though he had expected thunder, and instead received quiet rain. Slowly, awkwardly, he began to speak. Behind his disobedience lay feelings of pressure at school, struggles with friends, and a fear of disappointing his father. The father listened, truly listened. He did not defend himself or dismiss the concerns. He let the words pour out like water breaking through a dam. By the end, the boy's shoulders eased. His tone softened, and the room, once tense, grew lighter. That night marked a turning point. The cycle of anger had not disappeared in a single conversation, but a crack had appeared in its walls. Through that crack, light entered. Understanding generational cycles. What happened in that living room is an example of breaking generational cycles. Emotions, especially unprocessed ones, are rarely confined to the person who first experiences them. They ripple outward. A parent's unexamined anger becomes a child's fear. That fear can harden into resentment, which later manifests as anger toward their own children. The cycle turns endlessly until someone chooses to stop. Buddhist teachings remind us that suffering is not only personal but also collective. We inherit not only eye color or family recipes, but also patterns of reaction. To awaken is to recognize that inheritance and decide whether to continue it or transform it. Deep listening is the tool that makes transformation possible. By listening to our own emotions with compassion, we begin to see them not as absolute truths, but as echoes of the past. By listening to others, especially our children or partners, we offer them a chance to express pain without perpetuating harm. A story of transformation. Consider another family, this time in Berlin. A mother who grew up with a critical parent carries the voice of judgment inside her. She constantly tells herself she is not enough, and that same voice slips into her parenting. Her daughter, struggling with school, hears only correction, never praise. The girl begins to believe she too is not enough. One evening, after a heated argument over grades, the mother notices tears in her daughter's eyes. For the first time, she sees not defiance but pain. She remembers her own childhood tears, the loneliness of never being understood. She realizes she is passing that same wound forward. Instead of another lecture, she sits beside her daughter in silence. She places a hand on her shoulder and whispers, "I know it hurts. Tell me." The words open a floodgate. The daughter speaks of pressure, fear of failure, and the desire simply to feel loved as she is. In that moment, the mother listens not only to her child, but to the child she once was. She embraces both, beginning the work of healing. This is the miracle of generational healing. When one person chooses to listen differently, the echoes of suffering begin to fade. Breaking the myth of helplessness, many people believe that cycles are unbreakable. They say, "My father was this way, so I am this way," or "That is just how our family is." These beliefs are powerful, but they are not truth. They are habits. Habits can be changed. Every cycle continues until someone interrupts it. The interruption does not have to be dramatic. It can be as small as a pause before shouting a question instead of a command, a breath before a reaction. Small acts of awareness accumulate. Over time, they rewrite the script. When the father chose to sit instead of shout, he was not only calming one evening's conflict, he was planting seeds for a different future. His son learned that anger is not the only possible response. His grandchildren may one day live in a household where listening is the norm. This is how personal choices ripple into collective change. The science of emotional inheritance. Modern psychology supports what ancient teachings have long understood. Studies show that trauma and stress can be passed through generations, not only by behavior, but also biologically. Children of parents who experience severe trauma often exhibit heightened stress responses, even without direct exposure to the original event. This suggests that emotional patterns are etched into both our minds and bodies. But the same science also points to resilience. Just as trauma can be inherited, so can healing. When parents practice mindfulness, compassion, and emotional regulation, their children develop stronger capacities for calm and connection. Breaking cycles is not only possible, it has measurable benefits. The role of community. While individual choices matter, community also plays a role in breaking cycles. A parent who struggles to change alone may feel overwhelmed, but when supported by friends, teachers, or spiritual groups who model deep listening, change becomes sustainable. Imagine a neighborhood where parents gather not only to discuss homework and chores, but also to share stories of emotional struggles. In such spaces, shame loses its grip, and collective wisdom grows. One parent's breakthrough inspires another. Slowly, the culture shifts from reaction to understanding. Practical steps for generational healing. 1. Awareness of patterns. Begin by naming the cycles you see in your family. Anger, avoidance, criticism, silence, whatever they are, bringing them into awareness is the first step. 2. Pause and breathe. Before reacting in a familiar way, pause. Take 3 breaths. This simple act interrupts the automatic pattern. 3. Listen to your inner child. When you feel triggered, ask yourself, what younger part of me is speaking now? Often reactions are echoes of old wounds. 4. Offer compassion to yourself. Place a hand on your chest and say, "I am here for you." This softens the grip of inherited pain. 5. Listen to your children differently. When conflict arises, let them speak fully before responding. Their words may reveal hidden pain you can help heal. 6. Seek support. Join groups, therapy, or spiritual communities that encourage mindful communication. Healing is strengthened in connection. Why this matters today? In the modern world, families are under immense pressure. Economic stress, social division, and digital distractions all fuel conflict. Without awareness, these pressures intensify old cycles. But with awareness, they become opportunities for healing. Parents in Canada struggling with long work hours, families in America navigating political polarization, or households in Europe facing cultural transitions. All can find stability in deep listening and compassionate response. The practice is not bound by culture, it is human. Returning to the river once more. Generational healing is much like returning to the river. Each family inherits a current, sometimes gentle, sometimes fierce. You cannot stop the river from flowing, but you can learn how to stand on its banks with steadiness. You can teach your children not to fear the water, but to understand it. And in time, the river becomes not a force of destruction, but a teacher of resilience. Closing reflection for this section. The father who listened to his son, the mother who heard her daughter's pain, the boy who learned to see the river differently. These stories all point to the same truth. Cycles of suffering are not destiny. They are invitations. Every moment of awareness, every act of deep listening, every pause before reaction is a step toward rewriting the future. By choosing to listen, you do not only heal yourself, you heal the generations that came before you and those yet to come. The inheritance you pass forward does not have to be anger or fear. It can be presence, compassion, and the courage to listen. That is the legacy that changes everything. Applications in modern daily life. We have seen how a father listening differently can soften generations of anger, and how a mother's moment of compassion can transform inherited criticism. But the practice of deep listening and presence is not confined to family stories. Its relevance stretches into the very fabric of daily life. The river metaphor, the recognition of inherited cycles, and the practice of listening all become powerful tools when applied to the realities of the modern world. Whether in the workplace, in family dynamics, in the raising of children, or even in our relationship with technology, these teachings carry practical value. The workplace as a field of practice. Consider the average office or professional setting in New York, London, or Toronto. Deadlines are constant, emails pile up by the minute, and managers feel pressure from above while employees feel unseen from below. Tension simmers beneath polite conversation. In such environments, emotional cycles play out daily. Criticism from a superior creates anxiety in a worker, which turns into frustration expressed toward a colleague, which then leads to further breakdown in trust. Now imagine applying deep listening here. Picture a manager in a marketing firm who notices an employee falling behind on a project. The manager's instinct might be to reprimand, pointing out mistakes bluntly, but instead she pauses. She breathes and chooses to ask, "Tell me what is happening." At first, the employee braces for criticism, but when he realizes the question is genuine, he explains that his father has been ill and he is stretched thin at home. Suddenly, the conversation shifts. Instead of escalating blame, it opens a space for understanding and problem solving. This small example highlights a broader truth. Workplaces thrive not when fear dominates, but when presence and understanding guide interactions. Companies that integrate mindfulness sessions, quiet rooms, or listening circles discover that productivity rises because people feel valued. Trust increases, conflicts decrease, and creativity flourishes. Families in the modern age. Beyond the workplace, the home remains the primary arena where cycles can be transformed. Families today face unique challenges. Long working hours pull parents away. Digital devices fragment attention. Social media amplifies comparison and insecurity. In such conditions, emotional disconnection grows easily. Take the story of a family in Los Angeles. The parents work late, their teenage daughter spends hours scrolling on her phone, and their younger son retreats to video games. At dinner, conversation dwindles to silence or erupts in brief clashes about grades or chores. This scene is familiar to many households across the West. One evening, instead of scolding, the mother introduces a new practice. She asks everyone to place their devices aside and sit for 5 minutes in silence together before eating. At first, the children resist, rolling their eyes, but gradually the silence softens the edges of irritation. After the pause, the father asks the daughter how she is really doing. For the first time in weeks, she speaks openly about her stress at school. Her younger brother laughs as he describes a funny moment from his game. The family feels connected, not because problems vanished, but because presence replaced distraction. Such practices can be simple yet revolutionary. Lighting a candle at dinner, breathing together before a conversation, or ending the evening by naming one thing each person is grateful for. These are small rituals that reintroduce presence into modern family life. They remind everyone that home is not just a place of tasks, but a place of belonging. Parenting as listening. Raising children in this era requires more than discipline. It requires listening. Children, like adults, carry emotions they cannot always name. Without a listener, those emotions turn into misbehavior or withdrawal. Consider a father in Vancouver whose son refuses to do homework. Instead of scolding, the father sits beside him and says, "Tell me how you feel about this work." The boy blurts out, "It feels impossible." The father remembers his own struggles as a child, the shame of not understanding. Instead of anger, he offers empathy. "I know that feeling. Let's try together." The boy softens, willing to attempt again. Deep listening here does more than complete homework. It teaches the child that his feelings are valid and that support is available. Over time, this builds resilience and self-trust. The child learns not to fear emotions but to express them. Such lessons ripple into adulthood, shaping how he will one day listen to his own children. The role of technology. Technology adds another layer to modern emotional life. Smartphones, social media, and constant notifications keep our attention fragmented. We are connected more than ever, but often feel less present. The cycle of distraction fuels anxiety, comparison, and restlessness. Here too, presence offers a remedy. Some families in Europe and North America have begun using the sound of a phone notification as a mindfulness bell. Instead of reacting instantly, they pause, breathe, and then decide how to respond. In workplaces, teams set aside phone-free hours where focus and listening are prioritized. Imagine turning every ping, buzz, or ring into a reminder. Come back to the present. This transforms technology from a thief of attention into a teacher of awareness. Instead of being dragged by the current of endless scrolling, we stand on the bank watching, choosing. Everyday encounters. The practice is not limited to grand challenges. It appears in everyday encounters. Asterisk. Traffic jams. Instead of cursing the delay, use the moment to notice your breath, the sky above the music playing. Anger softens when attention shifts. Asterisk. Arguments at home. When voices rise, pause. Say, "I want to hear you fully. Let me listen." This disarms defensiveness and creates space. Asterisk. Sleepless nights. Instead of wrestling with thoughts, whisper to yourself, "Rest is here. Worry is here." By naming you, transform agitation into observation. These small applications accumulate. Each moment of presence rewrites the cycle of reaction. Each act of listening builds trust with yourself and others. Case study. A teacher in Boston. A middle school teacher faces a classroom buzzing with restless energy. One boy disrupts constantly, cracking jokes and drawing attention. Instead of punishment, the teacher invites him to speak privately. She asks, "What is happening for you when you act out?" The boy hesitates, then admits he feels invisible at home and craves attention. The teacher listens deeply. She offers him responsibility as class helper, channeling his energy into contribution. Over time, his behavior shifts. This story illustrates how listening transforms even institutional spaces. Schools become not just places of learning facts, but places of emotional education. Teachers who model presence give children tools that last a lifetime. Collective practices. Beyond individuals and families, communities can embed presence into their culture. Churches, meditation centers, and neighborhood groups in Canada and Europe have begun holding listening circles. In these circles, each person speaks while others listen without interruption. No debate, no correction, only presence. The effect is profound. People leave feeling lighter, no longer carrying burdens alone. Trust grows and conflict diminishes. Imagine if workplaces held weekly listening circles, if families held monthly evenings of storytelling without devices, if cities designated quiet spaces for reflection. These practices may sound small, but they reshape culture, the bridge between ancient and modern. What makes these applications powerful is that they bridge ancient teachings with modern realities. The wisdom of watching the river or listening deeply is timeless, but when placed in the context of traffic jams, smartphones, offices, and family dinners, it becomes living wisdom. It is no longer abstract philosophy, but practical guidance. The world may change, but the human heart remains. Whether in ancient villages or modern cities, the need for presence and listening endures. Reflection. Think of your own daily life. Where do cycles trap you? Perhaps in meetings where your voice feels unheard at home, where stress erupts into conflict, or alone with your phone, where comparison steals your peace. Each of these is an invitation. Instead of reacting, pause. Instead of defending, listen. Instead of clinging, breathe. Presence is not about adding more tasks. It is about transforming the way you engage with what already exists. Work, family, technology, even waiting in line at a grocery store, all can become fields of practice. Closing of this section. The teachings of deep listening and presence are not reserved for temples or retreats. They are meant for offices filled with noise, homes scattered with devices, schools buzzing with energy, and streets clogged with traffic. They are meant for you right here in the life you already live. By applying these practices in daily life, you begin to dissolve cycles of reaction and build cycles of understanding. You shift from tension to trust, from distraction to connection, from noise to presence. The world around you may remain chaotic, but within that chaos you discover a steady river of awareness. And when one person practices in this way, others notice. They feel calmer around you, more open, more willing to listen themselves. Slowly, a ripple spreads. What begins in a single breath at a desk or dinner table expands into a movement of healing that touches communities and cultures. The true home, expanding into collective belonging. We have walked together through stories of rivers and children, through the cycles of family anger and inherited pain, and through the ways deep listening transforms workplaces, families, and technology-filled lives. Now we arrive at the heart of the teaching, the discovery of home, not the house you live in or the address on your mail, but the inner ground of being, where peace resides. This idea, expressed simply as "I have arrived, I am home," is not only a personal realization, it has the power to extend outward, shaping communities and societies into spaces of safety and belonging. The meaning of true home. True home is not a physical space. It is the sense of being fully present, anchored in the here and now, at ease with yourself and the world. Too often we believe peace will come when circumstances finally align. We tell ourselves, "I will be at ease when the work is done, when the bills are paid, when the conflict is resolved." But as soon as one condition is met, another arises. The chase never ends. The practice of arriving home is radical because it declares peace is available now, not later. The home you seek is not in the future. It is in this breath, this moment, this life as it is. When you say to yourself, "I have arrived," you release the endless running. When you affirm, "I am home," you discover stability that no external change can take away. Home as presence for others. Yet the realization of true home is not only for personal comfort. When you are at home within yourself, you create space for others to feel at home in your presence. Think of the people in your life who make you feel safe, not because they fix your problems, but because they radiate calm. Being near them is like stepping into a quiet room after a storm. That is the energy of someone who has discovered their inner home. A teacher who is at home in themselves gives students more than lessons. They give a sense of security. A parent who is at home within provides children not only with shelter, but with emotional safety. A leader who embodies inner stability inspires trust even in uncertain times. Home becomes not just an inner reality, but a gift we extend outward. Collective homes. Imagine extending this idea to entire communities. What would it mean for a family, a workplace, or even a city to embody the spirit of home? It would mean creating environments where people feel they belong, where they are seen and accepted, where fear loosens its grip. In Copenhagen, some neighborhoods have experimented with community dinners where residents gather weekly without agenda, simply to eat and listen. Over time, strangers become neighbors, and neighbors become friends. A sense of collective home emerges not through grand speeches, but through shared presence. In Toronto, schools that implement mindfulness practices see classrooms become calmer. Students describe feeling more connected not only to themselves but to each other. The classroom shifts from a place of competition to a place of belonging. In Paris, workplaces experimenting with mindful breaks discover that employees begin to treat each other less as rivals and more as partners. A culture of home slowly replaces a culture of survival. Obstacles to feeling at home. If home is so close, why do so many of us feel homeless in our own lives? Part of the reason is distraction. Modern culture thrives on keeping us running, always chasing the next goal, product, or achievement. Another reason is the residue of unhealed wounds. When we carry anger, fear, or shame, it becomes difficult to rest in the present. The mind whispers, "You are not enough, you are not safe, you cannot rest." Recognizing these obstacles is itself part of the path. By naming them, we loosen their power. We learn to say, "Yes, fear is here. Yes, distraction is here. And still I can breathe. Still I can arrive." The practice of returning. The discovery of home is not a one-time event, but a continual returning. Each breath is a doorway. Each pause is an arrival. When you feel scattered at work, you can close your eyes and whisper inwardly, "I am home." When conflict arises at the dinner table, you can breathe and silently say, "I have arrived." These simple phrases are not affirmations of wishful thinking, but anchors into reality. They remind you that peace is not elsewhere, it is here. Over time, the habit of returning becomes second nature. Home is no longer an idea, but a lived experience. Home as a place for brokenness. There is another layer to this teaching. True home is not only where joy resides, it is also where brokenness is welcome. Too often people believe they can only arrive when they are calm, happy, or healed. But real home does not exclude sorrow or pain. It welcomes them. Picture a mother in Montreal who has just lost her job. Anxiety swirls, fear of bills weighs heavy. She sits in her room and repeats, "I am home." At first it feels false, but as she breathes, she realizes that home is not about escaping pain, but about holding it with compassion. She discovers that even in worry, there is space within her to rest. This is the radical inclusivity of true home. It says, bring your joy, bring your grief, bring your fear. All of you belongs. Home and the earth. There is also a larger home. We share the earth itself. In Buddhist practice, to feel at home is to recognize that the ground beneath your feet is part of you. The trees, rivers, and sky are not scenery but kin. When you breathe in, you breathe what the trees release. When you breathe out, you nourish them in return. To be at home is also to care for this shared dwelling. In Canada, communities practicing mindful gardening discover that tending soil is more than growing food. It is reclaiming connection to the larger home of the planet. In Europe, groups practicing forest bathing learn that walking among trees restores a sense of belonging deeper than any building could provide. When we expand our definition of home beyond walls and borders, we rediscover that we have never truly been homeless. The earth has always held us. A story of home. Let us return to story, for stories reveal truths more vividly than theory. In a small town in Vermont, an elderly woman named Margaret lived alone after her husband passed away. For years, she felt restless, as though she were always waiting for something. Perhaps a visit, perhaps a sign, perhaps a return to the joy she once knew. Each day she busied herself with tasks but never felt settled. One afternoon she attended a mindfulness gathering at the local library. The teacher spoke of arriving home in the present moment. Margaret resisted at first. Home, she thought, is what I lost when my husband died. But as she sat quietly listening to her breath, something shifted. She realized that home was not a memory of the past, but the life beating within her now. Her breath, her body, her presence, all of this was home. The realization did not erase grief, but it softened the edges. Margaret began to walk each morning, greeting the trees and the sky as companions. She started inviting neighbors for tea, creating a small circle of presence in her kitchen. Slowly, her house transformed from a place of loneliness to a sanctuary of belonging. She had found her true home, and by embodying it, she offered home to others. Creating a collective home, Margaret's story is a reminder that home expands when we share it. One person's presence can ripple outward into community. When we choose to be at home, we create conditions where others feel safe to arrive too. Imagine if more of us carried this practice into public life. Picture subway stations where travelers pause to breathe together instead of rushing in silence. Picture meetings where participants begin with a moment of quiet arrival. Picture families who, instead of filling evenings with endless screens, create rituals of listening and gratitude. Each of these is a brick in the construction of a collective home. A home not made of wood or stone, but of presence, compassion, and awareness. The legacy of home. Perhaps the most profound aspect of this teaching is the legacy it leaves. When you discover home within yourself, you do not only change your life, you alter the inheritance of those who come after you. Children raised in households where presence is practiced grow up knowing that peace is possible. Communities where listening is valued pass on cultures of understanding instead of cultures of suspicion. The legacy of home is not material wealth but emotional stability. It is not the passing of property, but the passing of presence. Closing of the final section. The journey to true home is not about reaching somewhere new. It is about recognizing where you already are. It is about ending the restless search and realizing that peace is available in this very moment. By embracing true home, you heal yourself and offer healing to others. You create spaces where families thrive, workplaces soften, communities connect, and the earth is honored. You replace the cycle of reaction with the rhythm of belonging. I have arrived, I am home. This simple statement carries centuries of wisdom and the promise of transformation. It invites you to stop running and to stand where you are, to open your arms to joy and sorrow alike, to discover that home is not lost or distant, but alive in your very breath. And when enough of us live this truth, the world itself becomes a home. Not a place of endless division and striving, but a shared dwelling of presence and compassion. That is the power of the true home. Conclusion. Returning home and breaking the cycle together. We have walked through a long journey. From the story of a boy watching his small wooden boat drift down the river to the father who softened generations of anger by listening differently to the mother who broke the cycle of criticism, to the countless applications in workplaces, homes, schools, and even in our relationship with technology. At the heart of each story lies a single thread, the practice of presence, of listening deeply, of discovering true home. This teaching may feel simple, but its impact is profound. It reveals that the peace we seek is not a distant dream or a prize to be earned. It is already here, waiting in each breath, available in every moment. And when we claim that peace, we do not only change our own lives, we change the lives of those around us and those who come after us. Gathering the threads. Let us gather the threads we have explored. The story of the boy and the river taught us that emotions are currents, and that resisting them only deepens our suffering. By observing without clinging, we learn to let feelings flow. The story of the father and son reminded us that cycles of anger and fear can be inherited, but they are not destiny. Each of us has the power to pause, to listen, and to rewrite the script for future generations. We saw how deep listening transforms everyday life. In offices filled with stress, it opens space for trust and cooperation. In families fractured by distraction, it rebuilds connection through simple rituals of presence. With children, it validates their emotions, teaching them resilience instead of suppression. With technology, it transforms every notification from a thief of attention into a bell of mindfulness. Finally, we discovered the meaning of true home. Home is not a physical place or a future condition. It is the ground of being available in the present moment. It welcomes not only joy but also brokenness. It expands from the individual to the collective, shaping communities and cultures into spaces of safety and belonging. The urgency of practice. These teachings are not abstract philosophy, they are urgent. In a world marked by division, speed, and relentless pressure, the absence of presence fuels misunderstanding and conflict. Families fracture, workplaces burn out, societies polarize. At the root of so many crises lies the same wound: the inability to listen, to pause, to be at home. If ever there was a time to practice, it is now. If ever there was a generation with the responsibility to break cycles of inherited pain, it is ours. We are the bridge between what has been and what will be. Our choices ripple not only into our immediate surroundings, but into the fabric of the future. A call to pause. So here is the invitation. Before you rush into the next task, the next meeting, the next obligation, pause. Place your hand on your chest. Take one slow breath. Whisper inwardly, I have arrived, I am home. Notice how even this brief act softens the edges of your mind. This is not a pause of laziness or avoidance. It is a pause of courage. To stop running in a culture that glorifies speed is revolutionary. To choose presence in a society addicted to distraction is an act of quiet resistance. Each time you pause, you reclaim your life from forces that would pull you away from yourself. Listening as an act of love, then extend this practice outward. The next time someone speaks to you, whether a child, a partner, a colleague, or even a stranger, give them your full presence. Listen not only to their words, but to the emotions beneath them. Listen not with the intent to reply, but with the intent to understand. To listen in this way is an act of love. It tells the other person you matter, your story matters, your pain matters. And in a world where so many feel invisible, this simple acknowledgement can heal more than advice ever could. Imagine if listening became the new standard of love, replacing the idea that love is about fixing or rescuing. Imagine if love meant offering space, offering silence, offering acceptance. How many conflicts would dissolve? How many wounds would soften? Creating homes together. Do not stop at the personal level. Expand the practice into your circles. Gather your family for an evening without devices. Invite neighbors to share a meal where the goal is not debate but listening. Suggest to your workplace that meetings begin with 1 minute of silence. These small acts accumulate, creating a culture of presence. A collective home is built not through architecture, but through practice. Each pause, each act of listening, each moment of presence is a brick in the foundation of a more compassionate world. Facing the resistance. Of course, resistance will arise. Your mind will tell you that you are too busy, that silence is awkward, that listening is unproductive. But remember, these are the same voices that keep you trapped in cycles of reaction. They whisper urgency but deliver emptiness. The courage is not to wait until the resistance disappears, but to practice anyway. Sit with the discomfort. Let awkward silence stretch. Notice the urge to react and choose to listen instead. Over time, the resistance weakens and presence becomes natural. The ripple effect. Never underestimate the ripple effect of your practice. One breath of awareness in you can calm a room. One act of listening can inspire trust in someone who has long felt unseen. One decision to pause before reacting can change the trajectory of a relationship. And when multiplied by thousands, even millions, these ripples reshape culture itself. What begins in your living room or office spreads into schools, communities, and nations. The cycles of fear and anger loosen. A culture of presence takes root. The legacy you leave. Perhaps the most important question is this: what legacy will you leave? Material possessions fade, titles are forgotten, but the energy you pass on remains. Will you pass on anger, fear, and distraction? Or will you pass on presence, compassion, and home? The father who listened to his son left a different inheritance than the one he received. The mother who sat with her daughter passed on love instead of judgment. You too have the power to shape the inheritance of those who follow. Your legacy can be a world where listening is the norm, where home is not distant but ever present. That is a gift no wealth can equal. Returning to the river, let us return one last time to the river. The boy who lost his boat discovered that the river was not his enemy. He learned that emotions like water flow if we let them. This story is our story. We too lose things we value. We too cry out in frustration. But we also have the choice to step back, to observe, to let go. Each of us stands on a riverbank. The question is not whether the current will come. It will. The question is how we will meet it. Will we thrash and drown, or will we watch and learn? The river invites us to trust that emotions are visitors, not permanent residents. To trust that peace is possible even in the midst of loss. To trust that home is always here waiting. An invitation. So I invite you now. Begin small. One breath, one pause, one act of listening. Do not wait for perfect conditions. Do not wait for silence in the world. Begin here, in the noise, in the mess, in the imperfection of real life. When anger rises, whisper, anger is here. When fear arrives, say, fear is here. When joy visits, smile and say, joy is here. Let each guest come and go while you remain the steady house. When someone speaks, give them your presence. Even if you disagree, even if their words are heavy, listen. In that listening, you may discover not only their humanity but also your own. When distraction calls, when screens buzz and schedules crowd, pause. Turn the noise into a bell of mindfulness. Return home. Closing words. I have arrived, I am home. These words are not poetry for the fortunate few. They are a practice for anyone willing to stop running. They are a declaration that peace is not out there but in here, not tomorrow but now. Let us walk this path together. Let us become people who listen, who pause, who create homes in our families, our communities, our world. Let us break the cycles of anger and fear and replace them with cycles of compassion and trust. The world is waiting for such people. The future depends on such people. And the truth is, you already have within you everything you need to become one of them. So breathe, arrive, come home, and from that home help others find theirs.